Hi, everyone. I'm Jun Shen. I'm the global expansion lead for Southeast Asia at Xbox. And today I'm talking to my good friend, an incredible tastemaker for all things games, Brian Kwek, owner of Ysbryd Games. Ysbryd Games is best known for their best-selling titles Valhalla and World of Horror, a Junji Ito meets Lovecraft horror adventure game. Ysbryd also has a few exciting games coming out soon. Demon School, a new style tactics RPG featuring college kids and demonic entities. Everdeep Aurora, a combat-free exploration adventure set in a visually striking and wholly unique world. And Love Eternal, a psychological horror platformer filled with devious trials and an unsettling otherworldly narrative. We spoke at length about the idea of tastemaking in video games and how Ysbryd picks and manages such striking titles for their portfolio. We also talked about the mechanics of publishing, including events, how games get signed, but most importantly, the importance of care and fueling the passion of not just the fans, but also the people who makes the games themselves, as a unique approach to publishing that Ysbryd espouses. Lastly, we spoke of Brian's perspective on the Southeast Asian and Singapore game dev scene, how far we've come as a community, and also his favorite go-to spot for ramen in Japan. It was a pleasure to speak with Brian, and I hope you all enjoy.
The lonely heart cries out to be heard. Careless of the ear it finds. And she who listens hears your call. And seeks new friends to take away.
Too scary. This is too scary. I'm going to stop this.
Hey, Brian. It's so lovely to have you on the Game Maker's Notebook.
Hey, June. Thank you so much for having me on board.
Awesome. I just want to preface to the audience watching that Brian and I sort of known each other for quite some time now, but it's my absolute honor to have you on this podcast and to speak with you about your work at the indie games publishing label Ysbryd Games.
I oddly get a lot less chances than I would like or appreciate to talk about my work. I think a lot of people out there don't really understand what I do or that Ysbryd exists sometimes. So yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. And also, thank you to the really amazing folks at the Academy of Arts and Sciences for helping put this on. So I'm going to really get straight in because I have a ton of questions that I want to get to. As someone who's in the business of deciding what games to support and shine a bright light on, and has a stacked portfolio with games like Valhalla and World of Horror, as well as the upcoming Demon School, Everdeep Aurora, as well as the recently announced Love Eternal.
That's
How
right.
much of it is your taste for games you want to work with versus what you think the market is going to love?
Oh, I think I've made the quote unquote mistake of trying to cater to the market twice across my publishing career, and sometimes it's less that the market says like it's less that the audience says, "Oh wow, you try to cater to us, you like you suck," but it's a whole plethora of issues that affect games. Whether you think you're publishing for the market or you're making choices based on like call it tastemaking or whatever, but the big issue that tends to be is that like if you when you look at data and you're like, oh yeah, I think a roguelike X whatever genre is going to do really well.
Yeah.
Based on data principally, that doesn't say anything to a person who's hearing about it. Like, why is this
Resonate
awesome?
with me,
Why is this
right?
cool? Yeah. Why does this resonate? Why does it matter to me? And I think like me, and to actually answer your question, I would say at least my instinct is that I would like to 100% of these decisions to be about like me saying I just want to put games out there that are cool.
Yeah.
That like for me, like I look at something, and if I look at a game and I'm like, oh wow, I want to see where the hell this is going. I just imagine that other people will have the same thing to say. Sometimes it's like a game maybe takes time to unfurl its magic and or mystery in that sense, and I also have to think about at the point of marketing, is there enough to work with? Like, so you can't, if you can't spoil anything further into the game in terms of what it has to offer. Like if the magic so-called only can work. Imagine you're playing Doki Doki Literature Club and you can't spoil like what it really is. What is there that can actually
draw the audience in?
Right? Exactly. And for me, I mean, I do think about that a lot in terms of is that intrinsic appeal, whether it's like something meta or something just something that has to be you have to let the audience slowly like
uncover it,
bake it in, uncover it. That stuff I do think about whether the titles that get pitched to us have that potential or not.
Yeah. And you've written at length about that in the sort of intrinsic appeal or the idea of the spirit or the discovery or the emotion of the games that Ysbryd Games is interested in publishing. And I've even had the privilege of meeting some of the folks who make the games you publish. And I feel like they're such incredible people, and that informs the types of games that they make and the types of games that your label is really interested in supporting. Do you think that the spirit you are referring to, and that is the base genesis for the name Ysbryd Games, is
That's
some
right.
sort of like rebellion, perhaps against like the conventions of game making or the tastes of the masses and societal norms?
Wow, I wish it were that deep, bro. I think it when we when Ysbryd was started about 10 years ago, gosh, it has been 10 years, hasn't it? I do think that focusing on the idea of spirit was simply to say, this isn't a appeal to logic. This is an appeal to, X mechanics plus Y genre plus Z, whatever, it equals success. I'm not into like a full-blown dependence on market conditions. And I mean, if I were, I don't think we would have chosen Valhalla at all, right? Like in 2014, you look at it like what most people would have passed over as well, while some dinky VN with weird bartending mechanics and being like, yeah, I'm sure this is going to sell 1 million copies.
Right.
Like nobody would have thought that. And I certainly did not think that. So it's really like, what is there that appeals to me? Like, if I had to be extremely honest, it was really like, I love cocktails, and I do love me a side of cyberpunk. So like what goes on in a bar, like you really used to say this a lot in the marketing copy for Valhalla, but you do really get to see a side of people that you won't see anywhere else, except maybe in their own homes if you are so privileged to live with a person. But a bar is the place where you see something not quite not that you won't quite get that vulnerability that you get from people anywhere else. And so that's the sort of thing, like if I had to explain the whole idea of how that the spirit of Valhalla like drew me in, that would be the first step, really.
Yeah, and that's amazing because as you know, I've also waxed lyrical about Valhalla countlessly. I'm a huge fan of the game myself, and I discovered it through their waifu bartending blog very early on. And I was like following the game's development, thinking to myself, wow, this cyberpunk bartending concept with pixelated anime waifus is just so incredibly like me. And as you pointed out, it's just sort of hits the notes of like the realness and the humanness of the experience, despite it being such a novel sort of setting and the characters that are portrayed in the game. Did you know at any point as you were working on the game that it was going to become this massive hit, with actual bars in Japan making sugar rushes and the cosplay and the fan art and the Valhalla likes that are being inspired by it years after?
Well, there was absolutely no way to predict the Valhalla lights, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I say this with all my love to games like Coffee Talk, by your friend, the late Fami. I think that Fami he put it so beautifully when he used to describe to outlets similar to I think how Chris Anthony described it in the previous episode of this podcast, like the trying to capture the feeling of a warm cup of coffee in your hand. I mean that, and chilling out at a really cozy coffee place when it's raining outside. That I think games exist to at least in my view, like to take you to places, to take you to moments and feelings that you will forget. We like to say, oh, I love games like Danganronpa or 13 Sentinels, and we can say, yeah, the plot was amazing, blah blah blah, but it's the moments that like we found ourselves in that we're like, you react to a certain thing that a character says, or like a plot, like a narrative turn, or in bigger AAA set pieces like Final Fantasy 16. You look at, wow, that moment with against X and Y boss, blew my mind. We live for those moments, and that's what sears. It's not the plot lines or the graphics or whatever that sears those moments into our brains. Yeah. It's just how to make you feel, right? And part of why I had that decision of early on of saying that Ysbryd is about the spirit of what this game is trying to do, is because without that spirit, that those moments are basically accidents rather than like something you intentionally try to reach for when putting a game experience out to players.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you call it an accident, right? Because obviously, shifting a little bit away from like sort of the emotive and spiritual quality of games to the business side of things, publishers and game makers every single day are trying to figure out how do they make a hit, right? And how do they put out a game that's going to excite the world. And like, do you think that in the world that we live today, with like the tools and the platforms afforded to us, that there are the dynamics in place to engineer the success or the ways in which a game like Valhalla or Undertale sort of enters the social fabric of the gaming community? Or is it really continues to just be a lightning in a bottle that no one can predict?
I actually recall a moment where somebody, after the release of Valhalla, someone said to me, yeah, I don't think Brian's going to be able to capture this kind of lightning in a bottle ever again. And I mean,
oh God.
I
I hope they didn't mean
seriously,
that in a horrible way. That's like that is not a very nice thing to have said, right?
uh, not really, but this person, I like them, and I think that
Okay.
they were coming from a genuine like slash concern type of.
Honest place, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, for sure. And I even now I don't think they were. You know, uh, we've had other sort of at least market driven from the market's position. Like we've had other hits like World of Horrors, right? So thankfully, no, it wasn't a one and done type of situation. But I did and still do think that in a sense that person wasn't entirely off base. Like how exactly you can't engineer something like that
Yeah.
in terms of from a publisher's point of view, you can't stumble into uh, content that does well for you. Um, so your question was, can we engineer like making? Can developers engineer making hits like Valhalla or
Yeah, well, I mean, like, what? How do we get games like this to enter the sort of social consciousness the way that they have? Um, we talked. You mentioned Doki Doki. Previous just a little bit ago.
yeah?
Games that sort of like just get in there and stay with us in such a profound way. Almost as you mentioned, like they are happy accidents, but surely we've got enough of body of work over the years to determine like how do these have staying power and how do others not.
I will. I've been waiting a long time to bring this up in a public
Yes,
forum. This is a what would be classified as like a huge bitching complaint, but um, there is what I personally consider this sort of phenomenon where gamers they tend to say, "Oh, this game is the best storyline ever," and they'll say something like Dragon Age or Final Fantasy, whatever, or Mass Effect. Sorry, I'm gonna keep raining on BioWare's parade here because this at least personally is what I hear in I used to hear in my echo chambers,
sure.
and um like I mean I'm sure everyone's happy now that Veilguard is out, but like this is speaking from my lived experience like over the last like 12 to 14 years or something.
Sure.
um so people like to say, yeah, these AAA games, they deliver the best experience, and what are indie games? Indie games can't haven't like delivered stories that touch that level of grandiosity or like heartstring pulling um, magnitude. And I am after a while, I'm just inclined to say, isn't these people's feelings a function of marketing? Isn't a function of the visibility of these games because they are, at least to the AAA facing player, these games are everywhere, and they simply haven't had a chance to experience games like, I don't know, like Spiritfarer or
Yep.
Valhalla, to put it in my terms. Um, and it really just uh, it bugs me because that's like we as authors, developers, publishers, we can put in all the heart we want. We can literally, in our terms, literally make the best, most powerful narrative in the world, and you're invisible if you don't market your game like
Yep.
in a meaningful, in a significant, invisible way.
And to that end, speaking about marketing for indie games, do you think that indie games should be optimizing for as much success at launch of their games or focus on the long tail?
Oof. I don't think that. I don't think that question has two different answers. There, if you're either aiming, in theory, I think the best way to put it is that nobody can aim for the long tail. If you
Okay.
have a success, you have a shot at the long tail, but you
Yep.
also tend to uh, it's really depends on your game whether there is a long tail or not. The one thing I can think of where a dev could have a successful game and not and sabotage their attempts to create a long tail is simply to discount your game too aggressively when after launch. Like if you hit like 50% discount, like within 3 months of launching, which AAA games sometimes do, especially if they quote unquote didn't meet market expectations. Average day at Square Enix, I guess.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, like the aggressive discounting will like signal to players, oh yeah, this game isn't here to stay, and so
Okay.
people get in, they buy their copies, and you're not going to see a terribly high amount of sales, more than a year down the road. Whereas Valhalla, for example, has been out for since 2016, and the long tail is still going.
That's amazing.
Surprise. It's definitely, there has been a slow decline. They'll call it a tail for nothing, but
Sure.
it's not it. The fact that an 8-year-old game, game is still making like a good chunk of money every year is that is the definition of a long tail, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that developers made a very specific point of, and I agree with, is that we practically never discount the game past 34%.
Okay. It's a very specific number.
Yeah, I mean, well, 33% would have been the correct number to look at for based on their choice, but 34% is the number that gets it under $10.
Yeah. Okay.
So, from a technical standpoint, it's like getting to that 999 or 989 point where people that's classic consumer psychology thing of not seeing the 4 digits and seeing just 3 digits.
Right.
Yeah. It's stupid, but it works.
No, it's I mean, it's a great piece of learning, especially for those who are tuning in or trying to figure these things out for themselves. The Indie Informer recently wrote that Ysbryd's portfolio is low key on fire with its distinct and staggering work. I just love to like ask outright, like, what is your gaming white whale? The one game that actually got away from your portfolio?
Wow. I feel like just for the sake of let's just say I'm literarily challenged, right?
Okay.
By white whale,
which you aren't, by the way.
About, Come again?
Which you aren't. You are not literarily challenged.
Some days I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing again? Yeah. So for the literarily challenged, like my head, like my self-image, what is a white whale means like something that like you never, like you've always desired this. You've had like you looked at it and like I don't want this to get away from me, and it did. Is that like
you got it.
Object of desire in that sense.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Object is maybe a little severe, but like just for the explanation's sake.
Yeah.
I think that the one game I think it's easier to talk about it in the context of like the last 5 to 6 years, maybe. But
sure.
Yeah, Signalis.
Game oh my goodness!
If
Signalis,
I mean, like those Rose Engine, the developers are like what obviously we can say this now because Signalis has been out for 2 years. And,
yeah, that's right.
But even with like my present day, like between me and Ysbryd's production lead Rob and I look at Signalis and like we kind of just turn into a puddle when we think about the way that game presents itself, the messaging, the visuals, just everything. It's a dream, both literally and figuratively. And I mean, obviously, that game was published by Humble in the end, RIP. But Um, but yeah, it's a. I mean, I it's something that I could easily, if someone were to say it's, obviously we have games like Valhalla and World of Horror that signify the best of the kind of experiences we want to, like Ysbryd is aiming to bring to players. But
Yeah.
Signalis is like, just, yeah, if you want to talk about the one that got away, like, I mean, I'm not, obviously not the only publisher out there that wishes we had gotten a great game like that, but yeah,
Ah man,
definitely.
Signalis, what a game! I remember that when it first dropped as well. We'd spoken briefly about it, as
Yeah.
it's such a special game. I also didn't realize that you had some sort of special connection to the game until I saw the special thanks to Brian Kwek in the credits of Signalis. Can you speak a little bit to your contributions, or why you've got a special shout out in that?
I mean, if I'm being honest, that like I don't actually, what all I really did was try to be helpful to the developers. Like at the time that I won't say too much. I'll speak from my point of view. That when I reached out to devs asking if they were interested in publishing support,
Of
like
course,
we every developer is sort of like in a sort of maelstrom of, oh, I have no idea how to deal with these weird publisher business
knocking
developer
on my
or
door
stuff.
now. Yeah, right.
Exactly. And I guess, again, from my point of view, I don't necessarily specifically know that the developers view the conversations in the same way. Although the credit does mean, it should materially mean that was something good in at the end of the day.
Of course.
But I mean, I just tried my best to be like a reasonable human being, like
Yep.
not someone who is trying to help or answer questions about the process or offer, like, hey, if you need recommendations for other people to talk to who are not like insane, like some kind of insane deal makers, or only want to talk about like business and
Yep.
money kind of stuff, then yeah, like I just tried to help them wherever it was meaningful. And I mean, from what I could tell, they appreciated the in just the general interaction.
Yeah,
But
and
I also don't think it's I don't feel that I did enough to deserve a credit, but I mean, I'm appreciative all the same.
yeah, don't sell yourself short. And at least in my sort of interactions with developers on a day-to-day basis, I'm
Mhm.
only always hearing about how helpful you have been to a lot of them. And as you rightly pointed out, it's not really just about deal making or the business side. It's just generally being a helpful person and sort of helping all these developers who have suddenly gotten all this attention on their games. To navigate that experience, to be able to come out of that sort of in a better place, given that anything can happen, especially with respect to the choices that any developer can make, with who to go to with and what deals end up being made. Which is why like I'd love to understand, like, how then did uh, developers from places like Venezuela or Poland or even Spain for that matter, end up getting picked up by Ysbryd Games? And can you walk us through that process of how then does that suddenly transpire into an agreement that both parties are really excited by, and how do you move forward from there?
Yeah. So, just as to be honest, in several cases, like, if talking about the team from Rose Engine, like
Yep.
Yuri and Babs, who made Signalis, to the devs of Valhalla, Sukiban Games,
Yep.
to the our one man developer, Panstas from
Yep.
Poland. Um, all of and I want to specifically shout out Nautilus Games, the developers of the Spanish developers of Everdeep Aurora. They a lot of these folks actually wrote into me first, which is
Amazing.
honestly quite rare. Uh, 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 and I mean, not it's either they wrote into me first, or maybe I had wrote in like Ysbryd had reached out to them. That was ignored in maybe like masses of connections that people make. And if it's not that, then someone on my team or someone close to us makes an direct a connection or introduction. So Valhalla in particular, like Sukiban Games, that was something that my former colleague Cassandra Kaw made that connection. I feel like they had potentially seen, their dev log, or definitely what we all had seen was the very old the early game jam version of Valhalla.
Yep.
On the Cyberpunk Jam on itch.io, and that sort of that was a different form of game from what the Valhalla we know today, but that was still enough to get the point across in terms of like the concept and the sort of the dream of what it could be.
Yep.
So that was, I guess, a traditional. In a way, it was a traditional. The scout gets in touch with the devs, but it was also, our again, like I described for our interactions with Rose Engine, our approach to it is maybe more down to earth, I guess. I mean, personally, I only talk to I have friends who are also publishers, and I feel like they approach connections, like getting to know developers in a similar way.
Sure.
And probably I'm not friends with the ones who don't behave that way. But yeah, like there are, of course, way more publishers in the market than there are people I'm friends with. Yeah, that's a dig at me not having friends. But nonetheless, so yeah, of course, that's a traditional we reach out to devs method, but in the case of Nautilus, it was as I described. I think we DM'd them on Twitter, no reply, and months later they came back in an email saying, "Hi, we'd like to pitch you this game," and we were like, it's the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where it's like, "Yo." So yeah, that was an easy sell for them anyway. But
no, I love that. I love that.
We're delighted to close the loop and actually like to set the deal up and help them get started on a publishing partnership. But yeah, like there are games like Nautilus, like Team Nautilus, like Rose Engine. They also wrote in. Yeah. And the last category is the introduction from a trusted friend, or a trusted peer in the industry. And so that was the case with Panstash, who's World of Horror was something I had seen before, but wasn't immediately sure that, hey, this is something we have space in our portfolio for.
Okay.
But we, Brandon Sheffield, who is the game director of Demon School,
right?
Also a game that we published.
Yep.
Are publishing. So Brandon actually was the one who introduced me to Panstash online, anyway. So yeah, I mean, and I think if you have, for those who are familiar with Brandon, Brandon has been in the industry a long time, and someone like that vouching for a game obviously is like
goes a long way.
It does, of course. So it's like, yeah, I should make room, right? And I mean that's. Nah, I mean like that obviously undersells the actual full potential of World of Horror, but as we all know, that's something that is in the Halloween season, every Halloween, and even outside of Halloween, that just like it destroys people in a good way.
That game is just like continuous to to just be on people's like let's play, especially with the VTubers and things like that. Every time World of Horror comes, Halloween comes around, as you mentioned. As any
100%.
self-respecting game developer or professional would profess, though, that they are too busy with the day-to-day grind to actually play any video games. Do you think a prerequisite to being a good publisher is always having to keep a pulse on all the games that are being developed and released in the market? As you mentioned, sometimes you've got to hear it from other people first. But what's your take on like keeping a pulse on the business?
I think that it's naturally impossible to play all the games that are coming out on Steam, even the popular, like the popular games of note. Like I just played Balatro for the first time like last month, and that game has been out for like yonks. I mean, maybe it's a span of 1 year, but still, like just like we at our age, I'm basically 40 at this point, and life catches up. You got family to take care of. You got like most people my age have. If you're going to get married, you've gotten married by now, and like you are running a home. You're not just like doing your job. You're not like we're not
right
20 something year olds who can throw our entire essence and entire beings into our jobs and also burn ourselves out along the way.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm not recommending anyone to burn themselves out, but that is sort of like, that sort of goes, the desire of most people in this industry to prove ourselves goes hand in hand with putting out so much work that you very often burn out. And that's a bad thing. So in a way, not so being not so relentless about pursuing like, I've got to keep my pulse on all the games is sort of a self-preservation strategy, if unintended, maybe.
That's fair.
I mean, you do also, we have to, I mean, if I had to give any sort of advice, and very broad advice, I think we all have to try our best to live our lives, enrich ourselves with life experience that is more than just kind of burying our nose in games all the time. And then if you want to talk about numbers, I mean, what is it? We have nearly 100,000 games on Steam now, if not over 100,000 games. When I started in the industry in 2010, I'm pretty sure the number was like 800 games. What is it, like 12,000% growth? You want to keep up with that, guys?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you're right. In some ways, it's sort of like giving yourself grace to just live your life and experience and sort of follow your tastes where you want to, but it's not necessarily a point that you have to just be on top of everything.
I mean, do your best. And I mean, for me, the sort of driving force behind my work is my, and I say this in the most positive way possible, the obligations I want to honor and uphold to my partners. As far as possible, I don't want to let them down. And obviously, the more that grows, the more I can't, as a single person, uphold all of that by myself. So but in the same turn, I have to slowly, but surely, try and grow my team to support.
That's right.
Like more titles. I mean, thankfully, Ysbryd is not the kind of place. Well, thankfully or not, Ysbryd is not the kind of label that we're not setting out to publish like 5 games a year or 10 games a year or something like that. I mean, maybe I don't think we've even gotten to 10 games in a decade. So, it's something that's still doable at our very, very small scale. I mean, for clarity, we have like a grand total of 4 people in our immediate like team, myself included. Keeping the scale sustainable and making it to, while trying to drive satisfaction in across how people are handling their projects, between our partners, ourselves, the vendors we work with. That's just trying to keep things stable.
No, I love that, and I think to that point, the highly curated nature of the portfolio allows you the capacity to continue having that deeper level of connection and relationship with the dev teams you work with, uh, and also allow you to continue to support them long after the game has technically been released. Right? I've seen, we were just talking about how World of Horror obviously is now coming around every Halloween. Valhalla continues to make amazing numbers. Do you feel like, does your duty to the games in your portfolio have a specific or natural endpoint, or do you just feel like it's just an ongoing sort of rolling sort of responsibility?
In a way, if the game is still maintaining a sort of top of mind, anything resembling a top of mind presence with the larger gaming community, then yeah, I mean, like it's certainly something where if we have something new to offer, like in partnership with the devs, if there's something new to offer, we definitely want to keep promoting it in a visible and meaningful way. But we're not, the way things work at Ysbryd is that we're I have to explain a bad issue first before I explain what we do. There is a tendency that on successful titles, indie titles that are released by publishers, a lot of folks end up associating that title with the publisher instead of the developer themselves.
Okay.
And we, wanted to do our best not to not be caught up in that sort of process. As far as possible, like with Sukeban and Valhalla, like I think way more people know Sukeban's name than they know ours. Industry people, I think they know, okay, standing behind the game is the publisher, Ysbryd Games. But from a consumer standpoint, it's Sukeban's the shit. Panstage is the man in terms of like the big brain child, the big brain developer who gave us this beautiful game. That sort of thing. And I think now I don't want to be forgotten either, but like the credit should go to the developer, right?
Sure.
I don't want to be in a position where like I some people may take offense at this analogy, but I liken publishers to the midwife. No one is going to say the midwife delivered the baby. It's
goodness.
The midwife's child.
Yeah.
Nobody says that, right?
Okay, that's a wild analogy, but I love it. Speaking of midwives, though, there are obviously instances when the baby might take a little longer to cook than and expectations of when the baby might be born might be a little later than expected. How do you and your devs generally work through and manage delays?
There's from a developer, especially if you're the sort of the head of a development team, there's always a certain amount of pressure over like, when are we running out of money? When do we need to go on to the next thing? And as far as Ysbryd is concerned, our mission is to make sure that they're not as far as possible within reason, as long as the developer is earnestly trying to get this game out the door and not like be stuck in some sort of
development hell
content. Yeah, not lul's not the word. There's this thing that developers do where it's like a spiral. They content like feature creep.
Yeah, sure.
As long as they're not caught up in an endless, this game's not perfect yet, we have to make it perfect. I mean, there is a point where reasonably you say, we've done all that we can, now we ship.
Yeah.
So as long as the developer is earnest about like not falling to the trap of feature creep, we're happy to try and make sure that they the developers can ship the game that they envisioned like people, like players, really experiencing like what the full depth of and breadth of what the developers have to offer, right? And in when it comes to delays, the heads of these teams are often like, I got to get this out so I can, people are tired, we need a rest, and then we need a break, and then we need to move on to the next thing.
Yep.
But not when you're this close to the the content, the game being made. Sometimes you do get caught up in you don't have the best perspective on what is good enough, right? As I think people like you and I are also artists in our own right, whether for personal reasons or in personal fields or not.
Yeah.
And like you understand that it's not easy to grasp it, what is good enough, but we have to help developers navigate that sense of it.
Okay.
And if it's not, I think over the release of several games which have had these sorts of growing pains, I can smell early enough when something is, if we're like
going to take a little longer than
3 or 6 months out from shipping. I think it's like, if we're at the point where we should be insert right now and we are not, you can pretty much smell that things are not done, not ready for prime time.
Yeah.
So we do our best to try to say, let's communicate early about like a delay. But we have also been in several situations where release is 1 month or 1 week away, and okay guys, we are not going to be able to release this at the time that you had hoped for. And that is a tough pill for everyone to swallow. But it comes back to that root of more often than not, the devs are the ones saying, like there's a process where you kind of have to do your best. At least from my position, you do your best to prevent people from falling into that trap. But you can't. There's the old saying that you can only bring the horse to drink to the lake to drink water, right? You can't make them drink the water. So if the dev decides, no, we want to stick to the release date for various reasons, then sometimes you have to let them come to that realization themselves that like this release date is not going to work out the way you think in terms of like the release, like the quality of the game that will be released. So we experienced both paths where we reach that extremely late
eventuality.
And they're like, actually this is not acceptable, we will delay it now, x weeks before the so-called release. Or we have gone in situations where like the dev says it's okay, so let's release the game, and there's nothing else I as a reasonable person can do to say we have to prevent this game from releasing. So you kind of hope for the best, but you're releasing a game full of bugs or full of concerns that will not sit well with players, and it probably will not please any consumers to hear this. Like, what? You allowed this game to go out with bugs? How dare you? But we are not, like, as a publisher, we're not the only people responsible for this game. And what do you want to do? Like, launch a lawsuit to counter this thing? Like, you can, but what? Like, this is that sort of like mutually assured destruction path, or a fire victory, as it were. Like, you win the lawsuit, but you've kind of scorched your entire relationship with your developer, and other developers will look at this and take notice too, right? So that's a lose-lose situation all around. Again, it sounds like, so what? I'm pushing the loss to the consumer, but I think Maybe it's obviously hard to take the scenario and think, yeah, this is people like developers want us to. It's hard to imagine consumers being okay with the idea that yeah, developers want us to play bad games.
Yeah.
But they don't want you to play bad games. They just have an idea of what is supposed to be right, and sometimes people have to learn things the hard way.
Yep. Nope. That's the nature of the games business, obviously, as well.
That's right.
I do want to sort of like jump tracks a little and talk a little bit about the other parts of like the publishing business, so to speak. For instance, events. I read that one of your first ever game shows was in 2015 at PAX East, and you and Cassandra, your business partner at the time, wrote an incredibly detailed breakdown of the process from setup to equipment to arranging travel for the developers for each of the games to the show itself. There's even a Google sheet of the operations and costs associated that's still up for people to see if they actually want to take a look at that. So it's really quite incredible. Do you still have trouble with TV rentals and booth setups in that respect after all these years? And how does one ideally go about acquiring TVs, and what do you do after with them?
So
that is a deep sigh.
It is. I'm signed. So every convention, every country that you have to do these things in is different, right?
Yep.
And years and years on, the situation and the utility of gaming conventions is in a very large extent, like the utility of these conventions are falling. I mean, I think for years, even 5 years before COVID, people in my position were already doubting the return on investment, the utility of shows like PAX, Tokyo Game Show, and so on. They were a lot more powerful and relevant prior to COVID, but naturally after COVID, and with consumers increased, somewhat increased vigilance towards not going into extremely crowded and populated areas.
Yep.
At least in the beginning. I mean, this is not going to be a treatise on how people mask up or don't mask up, but like it definitely reduced the overall audience of like conventions, or at the very least, it changed the profile of the people attending, even if the numbers didn't necessarily come down too much. The kind of people who come visit these shows, the way that they engage, the content that they're looking for has changed for sure.
Okay.
And I mean, look, and that's on the demand side, right? But from the supply side of what is the material cost of these shows? What's the operating costs for Reed Pop and Tokyo Game and Congress, and like the people who organize shows like PAX, Tokyo Game Show,
sure,
Gamescom, etc. The costs have only gone up, post COVID. Union labor has gone up, blah blah blah. Like the exhibition centers themselves have cranked up rates, so it's just like on a supply point of view, it's just gone way more expensive than and that 2015 paper the paper that we wrote is already like massively outdated, right?
Yes, at least from a numbers perspective as well, for sure.
Yeah, but some things don't change. That the big sigh for me is like me going to Tokyo Game Show, and like the easy route for everyone is you rent TVs or like large equipment from the game show, and it's always like this is a truism, like that as the tale as old as time. You go to Amazon, like for Tokyo, you go look at Amazon.co.jp, and you're like, wow, this 50-inch TV is like $250, and Tokyo Game Show charges you $2,000 for it.
Right.
Like, I mean, yes, they know it's a captive audience. You can theoretically justify a lot of these things. Not you as a developer or publisher in the games industry, but you like as an external observer. Like these conventions are used by all sorts of industries, like pharmaceuticals, military, whatever.
Yeah.
And those people with those budgets, like $2,000 for a TV is nothing to them.
They don't
But
think about
for
it.
a
Yeah.
developer, you're like, what the freaking hell, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
So these
yeah.
costs
Sorry. Go on.
haven't
Yeah.
changed. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, and yeah, I mean, you actually hit the nail on the head, because although I was really asking you a question about TVs, it really was a question that it was about like the nature of the events today. I remember we spoke about this previously. I've even seen your booth at Tokyo Game Show even last year and this year, and you've tweeted about it, how it's such a singular experience handing out the flyers for your cozy indie game at your modestly sized booth while dubstep and loud music blares at an insane volume from some mega AAA just opposite. Do you like? I mean, just as a sort of build on that point, do you feel like the way that social media and online game distribution platforms are today are significantly better advantaged for the indies, or do they still need to also think about showing up at some of these events?
I think what I've tried to consistently say about game conventions is that they are force multipliers. They are not They are very often not places of origination for someone to discover your indie game, unless you are shopping for a publisher deal, in which case there are specific use cases, like like our mutual friend Sean Toe at Battle Brew
Shout out to Sean. Yeah.
Last game Cuisinier discovered at a PAX Rising in the PAX Rising section at PAX East in Boston.
Yep.
So that's a inexpensive, relatively, relative to my 2015 paper, at least, that's a way more inexpensive way to get featured and get in front of gatekeepers and deal makers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, to answer a question that wasn't answered, yes, a consumer show like PAX, that's what we call B2C show, is still a place where publishers walk around and take notice of games. It's not just the B2B shows that people do this in. So outside of that sort of specific use case, I think that anyone trying to get their game discovered who didn't already have some kind of leverage online, like a large Twitter following, or so like doing well on Steam Next Fest or something, they're not going to have a very good time at game conventions physically. They can try. You're welcome to spend that money, but I think like in 2024 and moving it forward to 2025, you almost be better off spending that money, saving it for your launch and trying to engage like a streamer or a VTuber or something like that, because the cost will almost be the same.
Right.
Or like you can document the actual number of eyeballs you get at like when engaging a streamer. You go to a show and you get like maybe you get like 6, if you're lucky, 60 people playing your game per day.
Well, with all that said, over the 10 years or so, running Ysbryd, what has been sort of like a positive memory of your time on the event circuit? What does stand out as a moment that was like really awesome for the games that you've put out?
I think the first one that comes to mind, and I mean, maybe it's not fair to quote this one, because this is again about a game that was already successful. We're going to talk about Valhalla again, right? But
why not?
Yeah, why not? I think we were showing the game in like 2018, or no, it was 2019. We were actually showing, dare I say the name of the game? We were showing a very early demo of Nirvana.
Oh gosh! And, whoa! We're gonna hear it here first, guys.
Cough. But like, obviously the game is still has been announced as being in development hiatus, but
Yeah,
we
of course.
we were back then we were still actively like we in Sugiban were still actively pursuing like the production of the game.
Sure.
So we brought out like Valhalla cosplayers. We actually had a mini themed party for like friends and industry peers. And I mean, like, so you can imagine decking out a bar in like Valhalla lighting and all that,
Amazing.
which I would love to do that again. Like, just I think celebrating like games that people care about. Although my job is about trying to get people to care, like it's a moment where like that moment in 2019 where people it's you make Valhalla, a game like Valhalla, like be visible to fans and connecting with fans and with peers who appreciate the game and are happy to celebrate it with you. I think that's and we had Fernando there as well. Fernando, who's one of the two leads from Sukeban.
Shout out to Fernando.
Fernando, letting someone like Fernando see what we had done and like connect with people. I think that's really meaningful. We got to have similar experiences for Panstas on World of Horror, although that is, your question was originally for game conventions specifically. So I think the Valhalla example rings out more. We were also able to celebrate with Panstas in a different way. The developer of World of Horror, when last year at TGS, we were able to sit Panstas down for an interview with his idol, the man who inspired his entire game, Junji Ito, the
That's
horror
amazing,
mangaka. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to take credit for that at all. The entire opportunity to meet Junji Ito was the definitely all that credit goes to the team at Playism. Specific shout out to Shida-san, Chiaki Shida from Team Playism, who herself, she is a huge Junji Ito fan, and like,
amazing.
She really went out of her way to connect with Junji Ito's handlers to try and make this happen. And so it was just like super surreal that, in a way, this is really the apex of passion, right? You recognize that as someone who appreciates the horror of the horror elements, the horror content, the stuff that spirit, of course, that Junji Ito drives in his work, across both like as like fans and as like an auteur like Panstas who infuses that same spirit into his game. Like you're like, I want to do everything I can to support that dream, to support that the spirit of the developer, so to speak.
No,
so it was just profoundly amazing to make that sort of dream come true.
No, those are incredible memories, and I really appreciate you bringing those stories to life. Like the whole idea is that it's not just about creating this sort of realizing sort of the dreams of the publisher of the developers to get their games in front of players, but it's almost like it's also care for the developers themselves and sort of fueling and sort of helping their passion for the things that they've created go even further than they could have potentially ever dreamt of. And I think that's such a wonderful quality for a publisher like yourself to have, which is why I'm always also curious, like, what are the mechanics of how one gets an Android of their favorite anime waifu like Dorothy Hayes from Valhalla made?
I'm pretty sure I there are some things I can't say due to NDAs with a Good Smile Company.
Okay,
but I would probably say fortunate. I mean, for the first thing, obviously, is you have to make a game that has like
broken numbers.
Waifu or husbando is marketable.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Like in a sense of not just marketable but visible, I think.
Sure.
And that directly implies that you would have to have a game that has sold enough copies. I think a great example will be Helltaker, right? I
Mm,
actually
mm.
was motivated to figure out how to make this entire process work because I had seen Helltaker in Nendoroids, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
y'all, this game is free.
No,
So like
that's
you
awesome.
can't say generated X million dollars and sold I mean you can say sold how many copies, but I think I'm gonna have sort of functionally hazard a guess here, but the amount of fan art and like potentially like people making like fan merch of for that franchise probably has a factor as
Okay.
well. And I mean, for in Valhalla's case, we had actually made our own merch as well, so we could use that as a reference point, which is not something that most developers and publishers necessarily can bring out, but
Yeah.
it would obviously make a better argument if you did have that on hand.
That's amazing. That's it's one of the most the crowning jewel of the Valhalla merch. I think would be the Nandroids for Jill and Dorothy.
Oh,
I
you haven't seen anything yet.
Oh gosh, okay. I'm super excited. I'm looking forward to it. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about Love Eternal as well, because that
Please.
is the next really exciting and interesting thing that you guys have picked up, and it's from such a really interesting team. You've been hard at work promoting this game, which has been described as a psychological horror platformer with sort of like Celeste and VVVVV like traversal challenges, but also like an experimental narrative. Walk me through, how do you and the dev team decide the best way to show off a game like that in a trailer?
Without saying too much, I'm mindful that our audience are largely industry folks, right? So by and large, or people wanting to be in an industry, so we don't
Sure.
have to worry too much about the average consumer, the average player.
Okay.
But on that note, like it is I mean, without making a direct comparison to Doki Doki Literature Club, like it is a good bench. It is a good reference point to help you imagine what if you could only make a trailer out of the frigging dating sim portion of Doki Doki.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
That's like maybe 1/3 of the game in terms
Yep.
of like the overall impact, and it's the part that everyone is like, it's like playing Final Fantasy 14 and being like, oh my god, I can only advertise this game using a Realm Reborn. um yeah, it's like it's a situation where everyone says the good stuff is after X point in the game, and this is not true for Love Eternal, by the way. But imagine you're in that situation and you
Sure.
can only really use material from that early segment of the game. You like it is in some ways subjectively you feel like I'm trying to run a 100-meter sprint with like two legs tied.
Yeah, which
I
is
can use
why.
my
Yeah,
arms.
it's great. It's great. It's a great analogy, which is why also I was very curious and why I wanted to ask this, because I've obviously had the privilege of seeing a fair bit more of Love Eternal, and I do think that there's so much under the iceberg, so to speak, that it's almost like a creative risk. But it's almost like the importance of taking that risk is going to have immeasurable payouts when at the point when the game releases, hopefully.
I mean, fingers crossed, right? That
Yeah.
that we release this game and
Mm.
like widely get it visible widely enough that
Yeah.
people will be able to talk about it, and like that the word of mouth
Yeah.
effect is the ultimate thing that punches through any sort of that's the ultimate goal of any sort of marketing campaign or strategy, that people want to talk about this thing so much they want to share it with people, independent
Yeah.
of any exercise you can plan for or pay for. And that's our hope, that we make enough people, we encourage enough people to play Love Eternal, that they will see the real magic that's waiting in the wings.
I'm so excited.
And I mean, it's killing me right now not be able. You've seen it, so you like we could be talking about it, but spoilers,
No,
right?
and I definitely don't want to take that experience away from people. So I'm excited for that, obviously, and of course I'm excited for Demon School. But it has been a spectacular year for indie games. We have a smorgasbord of titles like 1000X Resist and Balatro, obviously, Mouthwashing, Arctic Eggs, Animal Well, Crow Country, and so many others.
Oh yeah.
What has been the one thing released this year that has surprised you greatly?
Do I have to have played it?
No, not necessarily. No.
I think that well, you mentioned Arctic Eggs and Chris, aka Kiririn 51 from Sukeban Games, was raving about Arctic Eggs like when I met him early this year. So that's on my to-do list for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, but I do think that I think it'll be easier to talk about a game that I have played, which is 1000X Resist, 1000 Times Resist.
1000 Times Resist, yeah.
Extremely relevant now, given the events of yesterday.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but the that's a game which I admittedly I struggled a little bit to understand why people were going nuts for it.
That's fair.
We have friends like we have people we've met in the sort of a game writers and journalist circle who will use superlatives like this is the game of all time.
Sure.
Like you have to play it now, and I'm like, whoa, all right. And I think that like when I first played the game, I was trying to find out, like trying desperately to understand where was this where are the superlatives hiding. Like
sure.
it took a while, but I think I've like the interesting thing to me is that it's not a game that grabbed me immediately the way that it's been compared to like the games like that games like 13 Sentinels that I like almost immediately was like blown away by.
Hooked by, yes, and that game was very good from the game.
100%. But that's also a function of that's a labor of love from a developer like Vanillaware. That is something, and even for Vanillaware standards, that's almost singular. Like I've heard a lot of people play Unicorn Overlord this year and not be as blown away.
Sure,
high quality game, but like the reaction isn't as
it's different,
powerful as 13 Sentinels even.
Yep.
So with 1000 Times Resist, I realized that over time, when I finished the game and I walked away, and I wasn't sure what to think, like, whether to justify the feelings of everyone. But I think, sitting 3 months out from playing it, I think it's been 3 months, and I think I understand it more now, because it does something really the way that this game is written, its expressions and its themes, and not just specifically touching on the as like people from who have the same heritage, like that can relate to that Asian diaspora themes at the heart of 1000 Times Resist. I think that we like these are themes that you have to dwell on it and think on it, and it's not going to grab you in the way of like 13 Sentinels is a blockbuster, and it's engaging, but it's not that deep in terms of like what it's trying to say about humanity and lived shared and lived experience. Yeah, exactly, trauma. So I think in that respect, I've grown to
appreciate
if I had advice for other people. And I think it surprised me that I came to feel this way, because I wasn't immediately all that convinced especially because I think I'm also maybe kind of a hipster. Like I see super latest getting thrown around, and I'm like, eh. But like it is the kind of experience where I would say don't go in with expectations and let
Yeah.
yourself and let that experience sit in you. I think shout out to Remy Siu and their team, like the team behind Thousand X Resist. They Sunset Visitor did a job that
Phenomenal job.
is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Like what's the word I'm looking for? It's understated. It's
Yes.
subliminal. I think that's the word.
That is a good word to
Sublime.
describe. Yeah, sublime. Yeah, it's true in the way that at least in my experience of playing with the game, it's sort of the thing where you're thinking about it long after you played it, rather than it being in the moment, like arresting you as some other games might do. And that's a quality unto itself.
It is, but I also wish more people would talk about would say more plainly that this is a game that is a slow burn and not like you can't say, oh yeah, this is going to punch you in the balls. It will, but not in the way that with that same
Intensity.
like intensity and concussive force. Yeah.
Okay, fair. I want to transition a little bit to talk about Southeast Asia. I think we would be remiss not to, given that we're both situated in sunny Singapore, and also you've done a ton of work to contribute to the region, and as well as Singapore as in particular. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on things. You gave a talk at GDC last year about the pitfalls of cultural authenticity as a design pillar for many of the games that are coming out from the Southeast Asian region. Your central thesis being that authentic culture alone does not necessarily evoke feelings in any given player. Instead, it's about the relatability of the experience, which I agreed to some degree. And other developers have also spoken that it's about first making sure that the game is appealing in a way that's familiar before you bring in such messaging and things like that. But do you think that the games and developers from our part of the world are getting more seen internationally, or is it still an upward battle for recognition?
I think that with no specific commercial motive in this next statement, like entities like Xbox are doing a lot to help our region very specifically, in terms of like getting the little indie, out in Indonesia and out in the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, etc., to really bring some light to the work that they're doing. But what is ever enough in this market that is, we already talked about like the 12,000% growth in game titles on Steam. Granted, it's maybe not as bad on consoles, but still, like, you look at the Nintendo eShop and the number of hentai girls and Sakura X like genre type of like titles flooding that I don't I outside of like direct curation, I pity anyone who is trying to get their game seen in that sort of environment. And so is it really improving? I mean, I think that we are forced to examine, we as developers or even publishers in this region, we are forced to examine what our weapons are in terms of meaningfully reaching the players that we are targeting. And that's why I mean, to me, that's the genesis of the whole, me pitching that whole talk to GDC, trying to at least encourage critical thinking and conversation, and by several measures, I think I have probably made some enemies by putting up that talk and being like, what the fuck is this dude on about? Like it's also the meme of oh shit, it's a Singaporean saying this, and the rest of Southeast Asia like beat up the fake Southeast Asian. There's a joke because
we know that that's a meme.
Yep. But I think it's essential that that we, our region, jokes aside, we are um, an island apart. Not well, in Singapore's case, a literal island, but like we are still in many ways apart from the traditional games power, the points, the gateways of power that
Yeah.
have traditionally been locked up in the west coast of America,
Yep.
in Japan. Some might say the UK, but like it's one way we have been improving in this region is like the trying to close the like to close the gaps between developers and publishers at least, and also developers and platforms. Obviously, we've already mentioned Xbox. We've seen your team and your colleagues like Agnes show up at local events, regional events, and to a lesser extent, we do see the same for like PlayStation
Sure.
and
Yeah.
Nintendo. It's meaningful when they come to shows like Gamescom Asia
Yep.
or IGDX in Bali, Indonesia.
Yep.
But I think there is a to me, maybe it's possibly an anxiety that lingers from like the last decade of games industry interactions. But for me, and I think if if developers don't experience this anxiety, if developers in our region don't experience this anxiety, maybe they've already got a good sort of hotline directly to like the platforms, so they don't worry about it so much. But
Sure.
it always feels like, developers in America who have that they have that direct, they're in the same time zone. They might be literally in Seattle next to Xbox and Nintendo.
Yep.
Or in living near in the Bay Area near San Mateo, so they can say hi to PlayStation folks whenever they want.
Yeah.
There is a anxiety in my heart that we don't share that same closeness, that same
Privilege.
like ability
Yeah.
to quickly, that familiarity and that ability to quickly say, hey, we've got this situation going on. Could you all help? Could do a shout out for us? Blah blah blah. And relationships still go a long way, and I think anyone who says otherwise has privilege they don't quite recognize.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I find your publishing label incredibly fascinating, given that you're situated here in Singapore, and yet you also seem to be able to like sort of transcend the sort of like the shackles of just our regional confines to be able to sort of like present it in a more global fashion and reach a lot further in some capacity. And I just find that just really, really interesting.
It might be that we do a good job of making it look like we are transcending that, but we're still internally screaming inside like, oh my god, like this. I don't want to go to, I'm not going to air any dirty laundry, but it does sometimes. It's still like I mentioned earlier, it is a genuine anxiety because it feels like we're yelling from like half a world away.
Yeah.
Subjectively, it feels like I'm yelling from like I'm like on Pluto yelling to people on Mars, on Earth.
Yeah.
Might as well be Mars anyway.
and to be fair, obviously you've got an international team, a small team, albeit, but a team that's situated in various parts of the world to be able to like sort of at least sort of be positioned to navigate some of these geographical challenges at least.
Yeah, that helps with time zones, but it doesn't help so much with relationships, which I mean, I'm trying to slowly mature that sort of stuff, but it'll take time. And I mean, it won't be like, oh, hey, you're right here in Seattle, want to get a coffee?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I do want to double click on Singapore in particular as well. I read in Cara Ellison's blog turned book, In Bed with Games, which is one of my favorite texts, by the way, just in general, and for people should read. I've been a big fan of her writing for ages, and I've had this book for 100%. A long time. But it was incredible when, that she wrote of her time meeting with you and others from the dev community in Singapore, almost in sort of like the early days, and describing a general sense of excitement for Singapore's game dev scene that's almost on the cusp of something new. That was in 2014. And as someone who has spent quite a bit of time advocating and representing Singapore since, do you think our game dev scene has grown?
I think our game development scene has finally reached the point where we no longer are beholden, or we have learned at least that we can't be beholden to government funding to survive.
Okay.
And the ones who are still here, shout out to our friends at like Spring Loaded and Battle Brew.
Shout out.
And of course, not forgetting the Gentle Bros behind Cat Quest.
Yep.
Teams like theirs, and we have, of course, many other smaller teams, but that are a bit. Those are products. Those are products of a more. Their teams are generally products of a more recent era within the last 3 years. So, the three development studios we just mentioned and named are
industry vets,
they're veterans.
Yeah,
they've survived the bad times, and there were bad times. Myself, I used to, you talked about Kara Ellison mentioning me in her book. That was when I used to run this game studio called Witching Hour Studios.
Yep.
Like me and the co-founders, we were very grateful to be mentioned and covered in that book. And it's, kind of interesting that we still don't. Probably more reflective of this current state of games journalism, that we don't see so much human angle stories like that anymore.
That's right.
But they are there, but who's paying for these type of stories? That's the problem, right? Not going to that.
Oh my goodness.
But, but yeah, when Kara was around, that coincides with the last meaningful support period that the Singapore government was active in supporting titles, in where they sort of understood that there was meaningful things at stake. Presently, the Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA for short, they're trying to get the wheels going again, but we it's a work in progress. I don't want to pronounce whether they are going in a good direction or not too early. Time will tell.
That's fair,
right? But I think, like I said earlier, Singapore game development as a community, we've gotten to the point where we are able to we've forged enough international connections that it's not, as long as developers are talking to each other, and you're not sequestered in some sort of silo. Refusing to come out to the community drink ups, refusing to talk and ask questions to those who have walked the path before. It's, if you just ask, and I think, if any developer here would ask, who can I pitch to? What publishers are out there that can help my game of a specific genre, of a specific intent? I feel like we have enough experience across this community that we are able to point anyone in the right direction. This wasn't possible 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
We were all finding our feet back then.
It really did feel like the Wild West. I feel back then, but in that regard, I do feel like we've grown somewhat, and it's
for sure.
We're always at least heads down, always thinking that there's some level of doom and gloom even to this day. But if we look back, we have come quite a fair bit away.
There's still room for growth.
Of course.
As developers, we, somebody is going to ask, why? So you're Singaporean, Brian. Why hasn't Ysbryd published a true blue Singaporean game?
Oh my goodness!
And it's not that I don't want to,
sure.
But it's. Or maybe more to a larger point, why haven't you published a game from the region? I mean, okay, that one I think is easier to answer. It's because in our region we have my friends from our friends from like Tokyo Productions and Neon
Yep.
Doctrine who are out there supporting games like My Lovely Empress
Yep.
or Space for the Unbound, right?
Sure.
Like these are amazing games doing they're very visible. They're profound games in their own right.
That's right.
And there I think there's no lack of good stewards in the region who can help. It doesn't have to be me, but if we're going to fly the specific like my country, my flag kind of thing, then it's on home ground in Singapore. Why haven't I worked? Why it would not? It's not for a lack of interest in working with my fellow
Sure.
Singaporeans, but I mean, we have a particular type of content that Ysbryd, like a particular literally a particular spirit, right? A particular aesthetic that I know, like in our friend group, Jun, you and I have friend groups where we joke about like comparing me to like Franz Kafka or something, and
Yes.
but I think the joke stops when I'm like thinking about what kind of experiences I want people to have when playing our games. And the to paraphrase the way Kafka described work, the kinds of literary work that affect him, it's basically like this the writing or the novel or whatever it is, it needs to come at you like an axe to your head.
Yes.
And not in the sense of it needs to be violent, like not specifically in the content, but in the way it approaches certain subjects, in the way it takes the subject matter discusses something very fundamentally human, something that is dark, and like I get people pitching me games that are like shiny and happy. It could be technically profound, but I'm like,
that's not for me.
If you write an email to me saying I've got a game that's perfect for you, Ysbryd, and you show me shiny happy stuff, I
need more depression. I need more trauma.
It doesn't have to be traumatic, but like how this thing affects you, and I'm not here trying to say, oh, I want happy tree friends. That's not the point either. That's almost like vulgar.
Yeah.
So like I mean I can't explain to you in a direct way, but like if you look at the games I point at, obviously we have our own portfolio, Valhalla, World of Horror, but also I quote games like Signalis or something. I can talk about other games I like and admire, like Sable.
Sable,
by
wonderful game.
Fury. My friend Greg from Shedwork Games, and he and his team did a really amazing job with that.
Love that game.
Yeah, there are games that are beautiful, spiritual almost, in the way that they just are. And I mean, like, I don't want to be like some kind of pretentious film critic going on waxing lyrical about the quality of these sorts of experiences, but like I am looking for that sort of thing. And in Singapore, the real thing I wanted to say about in Singapore, we've come a long way in terms of leveling up the nuts and bolts of how we make games. But I think we have, like, maybe we simply need more diversity and more
experiences.
More experiences to be able to and as that diversity expands over time,
that's right,
I'll be able to find something that I will feel really strongly about, that resonates with me, with what Ysbryd is doing. And I mean, this is not just for Singapore, but just any region. As the taste bar in that game dev, the local industry or regional community grows, and this could simply be a function of that the developers in that region simply survive longer, expand, grow. They spend, a couple of developers succeed, people spin off from that company and form their own dev teams. They start to succeed, and new generations form and therefore expand. hopefully providing new voices and new diversity of content.
Yeah, I think your point about continuity and sort of like the ability for people and teams to be sustainable so that they can get to the next thing and continue to make things is critically more important than necessarily the one thing that they'll make at this point in time. And sometimes I think
Yeah.
a lot of the young upstarts, especially from our region, need to understand that as well, as they're
100%.
sort of taking that journey. But to your point about you and your choice of games that you choose to publish, like I don't think you need to answer for any. You don't have to answer anybody. To be frank, because you are representative of your choices as a Singaporean, as also as a person from the Southeast Asia region, and your contributions to the video games industry, and your taste is singularly your own. So what you choose to put out is what you choose to put out, and I don't think anyone should really have any say about that. And it's just your choice, man.
I'm just imagining like the Straits Times commenters in like Facebook or YouTube comments going, "Hey, this guy's Singaporean. Why no support for local?" And I mean that. I mean, obviously we don't have to listen to the peanut gallery, but I do think about it.
Okay, and then that's fair.
And that's part of why I put in effort and stuff like helping out at the Singapore Games Association.
Exactly.
Because like I want to see that reality where there's multiple cool developers in Singapore that I would actively like could use Ysbryd as a platform to support.
Yep.
For now, it's not aligned, but working. I think people like you and me are all here working towards that future.
Yeah. And it's a long life, we'll hopefully we'll still be able to continue doing this. But like talking about development and things like that, do you miss being a game developer and a writer, or do you feel like you're embedded enough with some of the dev teams to feel like you get a degree of participation in the game development process?
I think I'll answer that question in a slightly different way.
Sure.
Sometimes I can go like at Ysbryd, we receive a lot of pitches for games. And there are games that we talked about the White Whale, right?
Yeah.
But there are games that are they're not Signalis, but they're still very, very cool and very definitely get like I look at it and it's like, oh yeah, I've been hit in the head with an axe. I would like to publish this thing, and but we're not the only publisher out there.
Of course.
Some with extremely deep pockets are swimming around.
Yep.
So stuff that I like doesn't just because I like it doesn't mean that we have. I can do my very best to make it grab. I mean, honestly, it was just like Signalis, right? Like I did my best, and Humble Games at the time had the probably the bigger reputation, the safer bet.
Yep.
And even if today we're a more established name than we were, X number of years ago, it's there are. To use a particular phrase, there are some deals that are too good to turn down.
Yeah.
So too good to that you can't say no to, basically. And it's like yeah. I mean, without digressing too much from your question, in those moments I go, well, if the games I like, if my chances of securing games that I like is going down, maybe I need to stop looking outside for games and go back to making games that I like, which is obviously an entirely different process. I mean, yep. I before getting too deep into Ysbryd's cycle of work, I also produced and wrote for 3 games, and
yep. That's right.
I still produce a 4th game. But so, I mean, obviously the lived challenges of a developer are different from what goes on in a publisher's seat. I think that although a publisher is still exercising a lot of creativity in terms of helping a developer figure out the challenges of how to release a game, how to
Yeah.
put the game's best foot forward across to the audience. You know, origination, like the act of creation,
Creating. Yeah.
of pulling entire characters and worlds and mechanics and um, experiences out from the ether. That is something that really is something else altogether. That I've certainly been out of practice, and like I certainly I do I miss it? Yes. Do I want to continue to try and create again? Yes. Will I be good at it? Who knows?
Who knows?
Like my practice is, people call art a practice. They call it artistic professions. They call it practice for a reason, right?
Yeah, it's a craft.
I am in many ways sorely out of practice, so I will, I doodle around a bit at home trying to figure stuff out. But it remains to be seen if I will actually be able to find time to produce something cool. Maybe should be working on like small game jams or something. But yeah, I'm trying to sort out some like create time
out of no
in my
time
personal life to make sure that like I don't show up like poorly for the things that I am already committed to. So
I get it, and like
one step at a time.
It's the same thing I was just saying to you earlier. I think you got to give yourself grace. Just in the way that you've got quite a number of things going on, and there's so many things we all aspire to do. It's just a matter of how do we figure out eventually to get to it.
100%. I mean, grace is a really powerful word, and we could all afford to be to have more grace for ourselves, but also for other people.
Yes, absolutely.
In these trying times.
Absolutely trying times. Aside from having sort of an immaculate singular taste in games, you are also a self-professed foodie, and and even spent some time as a food and lifestyle writer. What's your go-to spot for ramen in Japan that you think people who think they know ramen but don't really should go to?
Oh, good gravy. Are we going to talk about? Are we allowed to discuss places that require like you need at least 45 minutes to get to?
I mean, the floor is yours. I just want to hear your thoughts on what's a great place that people don't think they know enough about ramen should know about.
I almost have to Google this now because like I've been there once, but yeah, like I had the pleasure of visiting this place last year. No, it was this year. I'm sorry. I went there at the beginning of this year.
Damn,
like
okay.
It feels long enough on the convention circuit.
Trust me, yes.
From July to now, that's like already a whole year in my mind.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But in in a suburb of Tokyo, in Machida, there is a place called Ichiban. So good, they named themselves number one twice, and it's pretty good. Like my ramen taste has kind of it's just become more picky, I guess. Like the older, the more there's a meme where there's not a meme. There's not an online meme. It's like a life meme where you grow up as kids and you're like as Asian kids and your parents are like, I want Chinese food. I want rice. Like I'm not eating like you'll go to the US or you'll try like if you're fortunate enough to get a vacation to go to like Europe or the US, you're like your parents are like, I'm not eating that
slop.
Burger or whatever slop. I want rice. I want noodles. And you grow up thinking I'll never be that person. And here I am. I am that person. But yeah, so I mean, even within the domain of noodles, I've just become like, people are like, yeah, I want to go to Ichiran and like Ipuro and have like ramen and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just become like, no, none of that for me.
The crabby,
I'm just like, I like shoyu ramen. I like
Yeah.
what we call in Japanese it's niboshi ramen, which is like a fish, more of a
Mm.
fish sardine based broth.
Yep. Love that.
Yeah, these are my go-tos. And Ichiban specialize. I mean, the sort of winning bowl they have is the shoyu ramen. They have other stuff that they do really well. I'm pretty sure. I only had enough stomach space for
The one.
the one,
Yeah.
and it's 45. It was at the time. It was a 45-minute ride out. So even from central Tokyo, it was like as in when I say central, like Shibuya, it was still like a 45-minute ride
Damn.
out. So
Okay.
if you're in you are in like when you're staying in Tokyo, you are staying in Tokyo for work. You're normally in like Shimbashi or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that will be even further out.
But it was worth it.
I would say
Yeah.
it was worth it. But I mean, if people don't have less time, you can go to Shinjuku and find like some really great ramen too. Pretty
Sure.
The names are that there are probably at least 5 places I would want to talk about. But like if you're asking like what's my
The
discovery
one.
of this
Yeah.
year,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I'm super excited to check that place out at some point. But
we need more time and actual vacation to like just run around, like eat, and then just wander around
yes.
Japan and Tokyo. Really, yeah.
Vacation. What is a vacation?
I used to joke pre-COVID. I used to joke with some people like, "I'm going on a holiday. I'm going to Italy." In my I've gone to Italy by reading JoJo Part 5.
Oh my gosh!
And then they'll be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you, Brian? Take a real holiday."
Well, hopefully we'll all find time to go have that one bowl of ramen. But in all honesty, I just loved asking you that because I know that your singular tastes in things, both video games and music, and also like ramen, is really really what sort of drives your choices in and how you choose to put Ysbryd forward and the types of games you support. So it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, Brian. I hope it was as fun for you as it was for me to ask these burning questions that has been in my mind all this time.
I hope I answered it to some degree of like actually getting some useful insight, because it's my greatest fear is always like yapping and oh shit, I said nothing at all.
No, it's all about the vibes. But hey, as this is the last question I'll ask. The floor is yours. If you want to shout out anyone or you want to talk about the games that are coming up, feel free to do so.
100%. So I think in the next 12 months, we will be releasing a whole bunch of games. I mean, I don't have specific release dates for you today, but we're looking forward to showing off Demon School, by Necrosoft Games. The tactical, that's a great spooky vibe tactical RPG. Everdeep Aurora, the very nostalgic pixel art looking games starring a cute cat who's looking for a mom in a post-apocalyptic underground civilization beset by a meteor shower.
Yep.
And you've got, of course, we talked about Love Eternal, which is like it's kind of like Celeste and VVV meets horror meets Silent Hill, really. But we say these like easy to grasp kind of game references, but like the under the hood, we're looking for vibes of Perfect Blue, like dark psychological thrillers, and also season 3 of Twin Peaks.
Oh man,
the kind of stuff. It's there's a lot of left of field stuff that we're excited for people to experience when they try that game for real. That like Love Eternal is sincerely. I don't have favorite children, but I am looking forward to seeing how people react to that game.
Awesome. I'm super excited too. Once again, thanks so much, Brian, for your time.
Thank you, Jun, and thanks to the Academy for organizing all of this. I'm looking forward to, seeing what comes next for this podcast.